Last year, our first annual distinguished visitor was Ambassador Dennis Ross. Some of you may have attended that lecture. And today's guest, as you will see when he's introduced, helps us to further establish a high-caliber distinguished visitor series. To introduce today's distinguished guest is our new dean, Gary J. Simpson, who is the dean and Joseph C. Hostetler Baker and Hostetler Professor of Law. Dean Simpson comes to us from the Cornell Law School. He's an eminent teacher and scholar in the area of conflict of laws. He's been with us since July of 2006, and we feel very fortunate indeed to have him as the new leader of the law school. So I'm happy to welcome to the podium at this time Dean Simpson.
Thanks very much for coming. I'm really honored to be asked to introduce Kenneth Feinberg. As you know, he's a leading expert in mediation and alternative dispute resolution. He's the managing partner and founder of the Feinberg Group. As you know, he was appointed by the Attorney General of the United States not long after 9/11 to be the special master of the federal September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. In that capacity, he developed and promulgated the regulations governing the administration of the fund, and he administered all aspects of the program. And that included evaluating applications, determining appropriate compensation, and disseminating awards. Obviously, that was a very, very difficult job, and the nation was really fortunate to have him doing it. When that program was begun, many families criticized it as an effort to protect airlines from negligence claims, as putting really insulting dollar values on the lives of loved ones. Essentially, he had to estimate how much each victim would have earned in a full lifetime in order to compensate his or her family, and quite obviously, these families were so hard hit by the developments that compensating them in any real way was impossible. As he said, and this is a quote, "It's a brutal, cold thing to do. Anybody who looks at this program and expects that by cutting a U.S. Treasury check you're going to make 9/11 families happy is vastly misunderstanding what's going on with this program. Happy never enters into the equation." Mr. Feinberg received his BA from the University of Massachusetts and his JD from the NYU Law School, where he was articles editor of the Law Review. He clerked for Chief Judge Fuld, very famous, probably one of the 2 or 3 leading state court judges in the last century. Chief Judge of the New York Court of Appeals. He clerked for him for 2 years. He then served as Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Special Counsel to the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary, Administrative Assistant to Senator Kennedy of Massachusetts, then for about a dozen years partner at K. Scholler in New York, and at which point he founded the Feinberg Group. He's taught as an adjunct professor at many leading law schools, Georgetown, Penn, NYU, Columbia, Virginia. He's been the court-appointed special settlement master, mediator, and arbitrator in thousands of disputes involving such issues as mass torts, antitrust and civil RICO violations, and civil fraud. He also was very much in the public eye as one of 3 arbitrators selected to determine the fair market value of the original Zapruder film of the Kennedy assassination, and was also one of 2 arbitrators selected to determine allocating legal fees in the Holocaust slave labor litigation. He, in 2004, was named by the National Law Journal as Lawyer of the Year. He's authored many articles and essays on mediation, mass torts, and other matters. I wanted to mention that after he gives his address, he will take questions. At that time, raise your hand and wait to be handed a microphone so everyone will hear your question. And there will be a reception after the question and answer period in the lower rotunda, so right outside of here. So let me now introduce our 2000 Sister Distinguished Visitor, Mr. Kenneth Feinberg.
I want to thank the Dean for that introduction of some of my background, none of which was particularly useful in doing the 9/11 Fund. It was probably a hazard. A divinity degree would have stood me in greater stead, I think, in handling the 9/11 Fund. I'm really here for a number of reasons today, to come from Washington to address the Case Western faculty and guests and student body. First, I'm amazed and impressed by the work of the Center, this right here, for Interdisciplinary Studies and Dispute Resolution. I wanted to be part of that early effort, relatively speaking, to advance the goals and objectives of the Center. And given an opportunity to come to the Center, I thought it was the right thing to do. Secondly, I wanted to come to thank the lawyers. I travel around the country now, actually, thanking my profession for all it did to make the 9/11 Fund succeed. 1,800 families who lost a loved one on 9/11 were represented pro bono by my profession. Without the legal profession stepping up to the plate and helping these families in the fund would have never been as successful as it was, and I'm in debt to my profession, and especially to younger law students. I want younger students who are joining the profession to understand what a noble profession it is. There are all sorts of jokes and criticism of our profession, some of it justified, like any profession, but overall it is a noble profession, and you can serve the public interest every day in various aspects of the profession, and I think it's important that young law students understand what a great profession it really is. So that's the second reason. There are two other reasons, more personal, that I'm here today in Cleveland. My next-door neighbor is David Levine, a second-year law student at Case Western Reserve, who's been reminding me periodically what a great school it is, and urging me, since I've known him since he was born, to come to Case Western Reserve. And you know, David has a force of neighborliness that sort of brings me to Cleveland, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that he's here today as well. Finally, there is a rather spiritual reason, in a sense, that I'm here, and that is that I marvel. I spent 33 months administering the 9/11 Fund and learned all about public interest, public spiritedness, the attitude of the American people towards helping their own. That's what the 9/11 Fund was. And I've also learned and been amazingly impressed by Cleveland, by the city of Cleveland, and a large city with a very local, public-spirited, public interest Cleveland mentality, a state of mind, Cleveland. Really, a state of mind, where I don't see that in urban areas around the country. And when I offered to come to Cleveland to give this talk, and heard that Albert and Audrey Ratner would be present, who personify Cleveland, and what Cleveland was and has become, an opportunity to speak about the 9/11 Fund with Albert and Audrey here is an additional reason why I got on the plane and decided to spend a day here in Cleveland, for all the great work that they have done for this city. So for all of those reasons, some personal, some sort of civics, here I am to talk about the 9/11 Fund, public compensation, private paying. Now, it didn't start out being a great day today, I want to tell you. This morning, I was at the breakfast table early. The fellow that matters. In every speech, there's one person, not the speaker, who's key. This is this person. Professor touched it. Great. Thank you. Thank you. This morning, here I am geared up to come to Cleveland, right, to the law school, and I'm having a very early breakfast with my wife. Very early. And I say to my wife, in your wildest dreams, did you think that your husband would be discussing the 9/11 fund at Case Western Reserve Law School? My wife looks at me and says, Ken, in my wildest dreams, I don't think about you or Case Western Reserve Law School. So, you go from there and you move on. But actually, she's been very, very helpful. The only time during the 33 months that I was the special master of the 9/11 fund, the only time she got annoyed is when I told her one day at a speech like this. She was in the audience, and I said, yeah, I'm glad to be here, and yes, I am the special master of the 9/11 fund. And that night, on the way home, she said to me, Ken, I don't care if they call you the special master. They better not call me the special mistress. So she was very, very supportive, actually, of the whole undertaking. I thought what I'd do today is spend a few minutes discussing the fund and some of the problems that we had to address. Answer rhetorically some of the obvious questions that come up when anyone talks about this unique experiment in American history, and then take questions from the audience and give everybody sort of a sense of what this was all about. Most of you know about the fund. 11 days after 9/11, Congress passed a law, signed by the president, bipartisan support. And the law simply said, it was one page. It was debated a long time in the Congress, about 8 hours. No hearings, passed a very emotional time. And the law simply said that anybody who lost a loved one as a result of the 9/11 attacks, airplanes, World Trade Center, Pentagon, or anybody who was physically injured, could voluntarily waive their right to litigate. Don't sue the airlines. Don't sue the World Trade Center. Don't sue the security card companies. Don't sue Port Authority of New York. Don't sue Massport. Don't sue the security guard companies. Don't sue Boeing Aircraft. Instead, waive your right to sue. Come into this no-fault administrative fund. You don't have to, but if you want to come into the fund, within 60 days after your application is complete, you will be given a tax-free check from the U.S. Treasury. No private money. This is all taxpayer funded. Now, that was the program. That was it. Over 33 months. Oh, and the program, the statute said, how will the program work? How will it be administered? How will it be designed? We don't know. One person will design it, implement it, administer it, no appeals, no courts, and that person will be appointed by the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States. That's it. And good luck. What's the appropriation? No appropriation. Whatever it costs, whatever the award should be, the special master will authorize it out of petty cash from the U.S. Treasury. That's it. Astounding. Never been a program like that, ever, in American history. Well, so I was appointed. The president, the attorney general called up. Ken, we want you to do this. Will you do it? Yes, of course I'll do it. Anybody, people in this audience, all would do it. Albert Ratner would do it. Anybody would do it. If you're asked, you do it. President of the United States, you don't say no to the President of the United States and the Attorney General so soon after 9/11. You do it. So over 33 months, we administered the program. Now, statistically, the program was a stunning success, much to the surprise of everybody, really. 97% of all eligible families and victims entered the program. 94 people decided to sue rather than come into the program. That's all. 94. Today, as we meet here, there are only 42 people still suing in U.S. court in New York City. Everybody else came into the fund or settled out, except 9 families. 9 families did nothing. They never entered the fund. They never filed a lawsuit. They let the statute expire. They never did a thing. I met with most of them, overcome by grief, clinically depressed, paralyzed. They did nothing. Mrs. Jones, you only have 3 months. The statute's going to run out. You better file your claim on behalf of your dead son. You'll get probably $3 million. And you better file. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son, and you're here to give me money? Leave the application on the kitchen table. I have no interest. I can't get out of bed, and you want me to file a claim and get paid? Mrs. Jones, you don't understand. File the claim. Set up a foundation in your son's memory. Oh, thank you. Go away. Never filed. 9 people. I learned a lot about grief. 9 people were so paralyzed, they couldn't get out of bed, and they never filed a claim. Everybody else filed except the 94 people who sued. And that's the way the program. So statistically, now, how much did we spend of your money, the taxpayers' money? A little over $7 billion. Billion was paid to 5,300 claims. There were 7,300 who filed. 2,000 were ineligible for reasons that I'll explain. 5,300 received checks from the U.S. Treasury. The range of award, the average payment for a death claim turned out to be about $2 million per claim. 2,983 dead. The average award for a physical injury claim, about $400,000. There weren't many physical injury claims on 9/11. You either got out of those planes and buildings or you didn't. The number of physical injury claims on 9/11, less than 3 dozen. Total. Burn victims, mostly. But all these doctors that were called in, code red, triage, hospitals ready for the overflow of the injured. There were no injured. A couple of dozen people. The great bulk of the physical injury claims that I paid, over 2,000 of them, were all responders who cleaned up that guck down at the World Trade Center and had all these respiratory injuries that manifested themselves. Those claims we paid for work done days, weeks, months after 9/11. But the great bulk of the claims were respiratory claims and the death claims. The lowest award we paid, $500 for a broken finger at the World Trade Center. The most money any one claim was awarded, $8.6 million, to a survivor who came to see me with 3rd-degree burns over 85% of her body. Horrible. She came to see me, we spoke, and she got the highest award. And that was sort of the range of awards over the 33 months that the program was effective. We set up offices around the country. There were people getting on planes to go to California, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago. We had offices around the country where there were claimants to process the claims, answer their questions, etc. That's the statistical overlay of the program. Now, I'm asked all the time, what were the biggest problems in administering a program like this that had no precedent in American history? This was an aberration. This was unique. This was an unprecedented response to a unique, unprecedented historical event, rivaled only in American history, I think, by the American Civil War, by Pearl Harbor, by the assassination of President Kennedy, and 9/11. Very, very psychologically scarred event on the American psyche was 9/11. So what were the problems that we had to address in administering this unique fund? First, the law creating the fund required that I take into account the economic circumstances of each claimant. Now, that guaranteed by law that every family would get a different amount of money. And if you don't think that caused divisiveness among the very people we were trying to help, it was incredible. Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. My husband died a fireman, a hero at the World Trade Center. You're giving me $1 million less than the banker working for Enron on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center. I'm missing something here. Well, ma'am, the law requires, yeah, that got me a long way. The law requires. Mr. Feinberg, my husband was a sergeant at the Pentagon, and you're giving him $1 million less than the accountant. Why are you demeaning the value of my husband's memory? Don't you like my husband? You didn't even know him. Why are you doing this? Well, the law requires that, just like juries in Cleveland every day give more to the banker than the sergeant or the cop or the fireman, the law required me to do, the law requires. You're just perpetrating a fraud and an injustice as to the memory of my wife or my husband. So that was problem number one. Now, associated with that is, I'm supposed to calculate what a victim would have earned over a lifetime. This is a pretty sophisticated crowd. I could give every one of you a fact pattern. I guarantee we'd get 100 different calculations. You try doing that. Juries do it. Yeah, 12 jurors, and they're collective, and they think about it and exchange notes, and they do it one at a time out of the public eye. I'm right in the maelstrom here trying to make assumptions about work life. And it's very, very difficult. I'll give you one example. A lady comes to see me. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my daughter at the World Trade Center. She was a law associate. She was an associate, a second-year law student in a law firm. Now, when you calculate your award, Mr. Feinberg, don't you use that second-year associate salary, because she was going to stay at the law firm for 6 years and become a partner. And in the 7th year, they were going to change the name of the firm to add her to the letterhead, you see. Well, Mrs. Jones, I mean, we don't know. Most of these law associates come and go and stay a few years. Not my daughter. Did you ever meet my daughter, Mr. Feinberg? No. Well, don't tell me. She was going to be a named partner. And for you to sit here and tell me that my assumptions are wrong when you never even met her? How dare you, you see. So that was problem number one. All the legal skills in the world are worth nothing when you're chatting with this woman, you see. But that was problem number one. Calculating economic loss based on assumptions about how the world works, when every one of us knows that you can plan all you want. Curveballs get thrown every day. Problem number two. The law required me to add to the award non-economic loss, pain and suffering, emotional distress. I'm not Solomon, and I'm not going to start calibrating various degrees of emotional distress among victims of 9/11. I mean, that's just crazy. So I came up with a standard formula. One size fits all. $250,000 for the death of the victim, $100,000 for each surviving spouse and dependent. That's it. That's non-economic. Now, that had the advantage of unifying the families in total opposition to my cheapness, you see. The one advantage of what I did there is all of them joined hands to criticize. And that, but we stuck to our guns on that. And with very, very, very rare exceptions, we did not modify the non-economic loss formula. I had discretion, but it took an extraordinary situation. I mean, of 5,300 families, I think I modified and raised pain and suffering 5 times. One time I did it when a lady came to see me and very emotionally explained how they had gone to the funeral of her husband and they had buried the wrong body. And on that one, it was just horrifying. We found out afterward that her actual husband had lived for 4 days screaming, "Where is my wife?" And the police made a misidentification, and he died without ever seeing her, and they buried the wrong body. And then they had to disinter, and it was horrible. So on that, but there were a few just beyond belief where we adjusted the non-economic, but for the most part left it the same for everybody, based on that formula. That was the second problem. Third problem, Congress in its infinite wisdom. You look at the statute, there's not one word in the statute about who's eligible to file with the fund. Which family member? Which family? Mr. Feinberg, I was the sister of the brother who died. He hated his other sister. Don't let her get a penny. Don't let her get a penny. Other sister, what do you say? Is my sister bad-mouthing me again? My brother hated her. Keep her out of the compensation. I'm no family counselor. I don't know the facts. Dear Mr. Feinberg, can I see you? Yeah. I was the fiancé of the victim. We were going to be married on October 11th. I should be treated like a spouse. Biological parents, what do you say to that? That marriage was never going to take place. Do you know, Mr. Feinberg, on September 10th, our dead son, on September 10th, he called us and said, "Mom, I'm thinking of calling the whole thing off." Fiancé, what do you say to that? Is that right, Mr. Feinberg? Here's the wedding invitation to the church. The wedding invitation. Do you know, Mr. Feinberg, on August 11th, they held a shower for me and said, "We're not losing a son, we're gaining a daughter." And now they say the marriage wasn't going to take place? That's outrageous. Mr. Feinberg, I was the same-sex partner of the victim. We lived together for 11 years. You ought to treat me like a spouse. Biological parents, what do you say to that? My daughter said she was coming home. She was tired of that relationship. On September 10th, she called us and said, "I'm sick and tired of living with this woman. I'm coming home." It was over. Same-sex partner, what do you say about that? Mr. Feinberg, let me tell you something. I moved in with their daughter 11 years ago. They disowned her. They haven't spoken to their daughter in 11 years until she died, and now they say it was going to be over? How dare them? Now, Solomon couldn't figure this out. I'm a bureaucrat. I'm trying to administer a program. I don't know the facts. I don't know. I'll tell you one thing. None of these people were lying. This wasn't about the money. This was about a life that isn't going to be and a future that's now doomed. And people believe what they want to believe. I'm convinced of that. This wasn't about money. This was about my son's not going to be able to be married. He died in that tower, and there wasn't going to be a marriage, you see. And that's the way people defend against this horror, these curveballs that get thrown at them. And I honestly believe they believed it, these stories. Well, what am I going to do? I can't spend months trying to get the facts of these family squabbles. We set up rules. If there's a will, we followed the will. If the same-sex partner had a will and left her estate to their same-sex partner, that's the end, that's it. The will governs. Everybody should have a will. Only 25% of the dead had wills in 9/11. If there's no will, the law of intestacy. There are some students here who have taken trusts in the States. The law of intestacy. If there's no will and somebody gets hit by an automobile out here and dies and there's no will, the law of Ohio spells out how the estate should be administered. And under the wrongful death statute, how the award should be rendered. And we followed the law of the domicile of the victim governing trusts and estates and wrongful death. There's nothing else I could do. I couldn't rewrite, I couldn't try and figure out what would have been. So I followed the law of intestacy. Now, I must say that didn't help fiancés and same-sex partners, but we worked out most of it. I mediated, like the center. We sat down with the biological parents and the fiancés and the same, and we just cut a deal. Mrs. Jones, you lost your son. Will you give 40% of the award to the fiancé? Yes, no. No. 20%. No. What if I add to the award, in my discretion, 20% and earmark it for the fiancé? Oh, well. Or no. And if it's no, 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 there's nothing more I can do. But we worked out all. Do you know it's been 5 years since 9/11? There's still today 5 families litigating over my awards in the courts. 5 years later. I deposited the money into the probate court, the treasury. Here it is. I tried. You guys go fight. And 5 of them are still fighting over who gets the money. All the others are worked out. But that was a problem. Eligibility. Problem number 4. What do we do in the law? The law allows compensation to undocumented worker families. 11 people died in the World Trade Center who had no business working there. They didn't have a green card. They were undocumented workers, all eligible under the fund. Congress made no distinction. They were all eligible, even though they weren't even supposed to be working. You try convincing the survivors to take the money. We translated the applications into Spanish and Korean. And I went up to the Bronx. Mrs. Dominguez, your husband died in the World Trade Center, in the restaurant. You and your 3 children are entitled to $2.7 million tax-free. We'll help you fill out the form. Nope. Why not? You'll deport me. No. Here, read the immigration order in Spanish. No deportation, and we'll give you a working green card. The American people. No, you'll put me in jail. No, we won't put you in jail. You'll take away my children. No, we won't take away your children. There'll be a fine. No, there'll not be a fine. You'll deport me. Now, I'm a professional. You get frustrated. You know, Mrs. Dominguez, you're going to be deported. You'll be the richest person in the Dominican Republic. Take the money. Now, you can't say that, of course, but you get very, very frustrated here. $2.7 million, you're worried about being deported to the Dominican Republic? I mean, listen, there's no penalty. Now, eventually, they all came in to the fund. How? Nothing I did. We issued 1 award to 1 family. They went back into the community and said, it's legit. Here's our award, and here's our green card. And eventually, they circled the wagons and spoke to one another. They all came in. Next problem. 65 families from foreign countries were eligible. Resident aliens, visitors to the Pentagon, Nigeria, China, Norway, Spain, all eligible. I went to London and met with 35 families. All right, everybody. You're all eligible. You lost a loved one on 9/11. You're all eligible to collect money under this program. Any questions? Up go the hands. Do we have to give up our citizenship to get the money? No. Do we have to surrender our passports to get the money? Nope. Do we have to come to the United States to get the money? Nope. Do we get the money in local currency or American? You get American dollars. Mm-hmm. Now, does anybody want a form? No, we'll get back to you. What's the catch? You mean to tell us that the American people are going to give us a check, tax-free, for the loss of our loved one, and there's no catch? CIA. No. No CIA. Wait a minute. This doesn't ring true. We'll get back to you. Now, eventually, they all came in when they started to see that it was legitimate. But it was difficult to convince people that there was no catch here. This was a rather unique, once-in-a-lifetime program, not to be repeated, but that was a problem. So all of these problems, Congress never thought through, other than to say, let that guy figure it out, and let's make it work. Then, of course, by far the biggest problem, and the one that proved to be the most difficult, by far, not even close. We decided to give every single family or victim the opportunity to come in and see me personally, or my surrogate, if there were too many people that wanted to come on a given day. We had some deputy special masters. But we decided to give everybody an opportunity to be heard. No one came to me to argue about more money. People came to me really to vent about life's unfairness. And the stories I heard, and what I conducted 1,800 hearings, individual hearings, with 1,800 families that either lost a loved one on 9/11 or some victims came in who were terribly burned and scarred. And what you heard at these hearings was stranger than fiction, more chilling than fiction. Most of the hearings, something like this. Mr. Feinberg, thank you for seeing me, and I want to thank you for taking the time to see me. I lost my wife in the World Trade Center. We were married for 23 years. And I'd like to start off this hearing by playing you a video of our wedding 23 years ago. I want you to see my wife in happier times. Play the video. Thank you, Mr. Feinberg, for watching that video. Now, I'd like to continue the hearing. Let's go through the wedding album, page by page. Here's his uncle, that was his little sister, oh, he looked great there, she was wonderful, and you go through that wedding. Medals, ribbons, good certificates of good conduct, diplomas, everything imaginable. We had a room stacked up with memorabilia from people who wanted to express their view, to validate what they lost. And we gave people that opportunity, but it was very, very difficult. One lady came to see me and said, Mr. Feinberg, I'd like to start off this hearing. I lost my husband on the 103rd floor of the World Trade Center, and I want to play for you the audio tape of his calling me to say goodbye. I kept it on the voice message machine. And I want you to listen to him dying on this telephone call. I go, Mrs. Jones, you don't have to play that because that'll have no bearing on my compensation. It is only a terrible trauma, and you're going to listen to what those murderers did to my husband. Play it. Unbelievable. So, I mean, that was part of the problem, you see, that we had to, burden, make sure we solidify ourselves to listen to this. But we did. And there were about 2,300 hearings that were held, and everybody came in with their own story. And the stories that we heard were incredible. 3 or 4 examples. Give you an idea of what we had to go through in order to validate the program and get people to believe that the program was legitimate. Legitimacy was critical if people were going to come into the fund. Lady comes to see me, 24 years old, crying. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman, and he died. And he left me with our 2 children, 6 and 4. And he was a great man, Mr. Feinberg, and he's gone. And you estimate that I'm going to get about $1 million. Well, I want more than $1 million, and I want it right away. Right away. Mrs. Jones, $1 million is very generous. We have to process the claim and everything. I mean, what's the rush in terms of, we'll get it to you as soon as we can. No. Well, you want to know the reason, Mr. Feinberg? I'm going to tell you the reason. I need this money right away. I lost my husband. I have 2 little ones. I have terminal cancer. I have 8 weeks to live. My husband was going to survive me and take care of these 2 little ones. Now they're going to be orphans. And I got to move pretty fast, Mr. Feinberg, because I only got a few more weeks. Well, we accelerated the payment. 7 weeks later, we went to her funeral. couldn't think that one up. Examples like that abound when you read the files. 70-year-old man, Mr. Feinberg, I'm in tears. I lost my son at the Pentagon. He got out of the Pentagon. He escaped after the plane hit. He thought his sister, who also worked at the Pentagon, was trapped. He went back in to look for his sister. His sister escaped through a side door to safety. He died looking for her. Where is the justice, Mr. Feinberg? This man says to me. My life is over. Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband, a fireman at the Pentagon. He rescued 30 people from Tower 1 and brought them to safety to Lower Broadway. The battalion chief said to him, "Stay here. Too dangerous." He said, "Chief, I've never disobeyed you in 15 years that I've been in the force, but I see 10 people trapped in that mezzanine, and I'm going to go rescue them." Mr. Feinberg, she's crying inconsolably. She says, "Mr. Feinberg, while he was running across the World Trade Center plaza to rescue those people, he was killed by somebody who jumped to their death from the 103rd floor and hit him. If he had taken one step either way, Mr. Feinberg, he might have lived. But both of them died when that person jumped and hit him. There is no God, Mr. Feinberg. Don't tell me there's a God. No God would allow my husband to die that way, trying to rescue other people." So those were the stories. Now, occasionally, we heard stories that would test the wisdom of Solomon. What would you do? What would each of you have done with this final example? Lady comes to see me, 24, beautiful, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Feinberg, I lost my husband at the World Trade Center. He was a fireman, and he was Mr. Mom. Every day that he wasn't at that firehouse, he was home, teaching our 6-year-old how to play baseball, teaching our 4-year-old how to read, reading a bedtime story to the 2-year-old. He was Mr. Mom. And what a chef! He cooked all our meals. He cleaned the house. He tended to our garden. Mr. Feinberg, if you only knew him, he was Mr. Mom. My life is over. I survived, but I wish I hadn't, because without him, I am gone. I am lost. I have my 3 little ones. It's the only thing that keeps me going, but I will never again be the same without my husband, Mr. Mom." She leaves. The next day, I get a telephone call from a lawyer in Queens. "Mr. Feinberg." "Yeah." "Did you meet yesterday with the lady with the 3 kids, Mr. Mom, 6, 4, and 2? And "Yeah." It was a terrible story. "Yeah." "Now, Mr. Feinberg, listen. I want you to know I'm not trying to cause any trouble. I'm really not. But I want you to know she doesn't know that her husband had 2 other children by his girlfriend in Queens, 5 and 3. Now, she has no knowledge of this other life that her husband led and these other 2 children. But I just want you to know I represent that family in Queens. And when you cut your check, there's not 3 children that survived the victim. There's 5 children that survived the victim, and they all are eligible under the fund. But I'm sure you'll do the right thing. Thank you, click." Now, do you tell her? Do you tell her? Do you tell her about these 2 other children and the girlfriend and what's going on in Queens? Well, we hemmed and hawed, and we went around and around. 3 a.m. you think these things. I mean, you don't sleep over something like that. Now, we decided in the end, I'm not telling her a thing. She's got a memory of her husband. I don't know the facts. I don't know what's going on, and she's got a view of her husband. Now, that was 5 years ago. I'll bet you anything that today she knows all about this. But at the time, I just didn't think it was the right thing for me to do. So we cut one check to the spouse who came to see me with the 3 kids, and we cut a separate confidential check to the girlfriend as guardian of the 2 kids. And that was it. I mean, close the file. I don't know what would happen. But that was an example of, you have to play Solomon a little bit in deciding what to do. You see, that's why my legal background for the 9/11 fund was at best irrelevant, and at worst was actually a hindrance. I would have been much better off with a divinity degree or a degree in philosophy in terms of how you justify this and how you make decisions and how you decide what should be done. So that's how the program worked in practice, and those were the problems. Now, wherever I go to discuss the 9/11 fund with lawyers or others, public, there are 3 questions that come up all the time, everywhere I go. And I'll anticipate them being asked here because they're the 3 questions that lie at the heart of all of this. Question number 1, was this program a good idea? Was it sound public policy? Now, I happen to believe the program was a fabulous idea, and it was the right thing to do, and it exhibited the best in the American character, the best of our heritage, helping our own, the less fortunate, the victims of a horrible, horrible tragedy. I think what Congress did was the right thing to do. But let me tell you, it is a very close question. You should read some of the emails that I got while administering the fund. Dear Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son in Oklahoma City. Where's my check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I lost my son on the USS Cole in Yemen fighting terrorism, the victim of a suicide bomber. How come I'm not eligible? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I lost my daughter in the African embassy bombings in Kenya in 1998. Where's my check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I lost my wife in the basement of the World Trade Center in the 1993 attacks committed by the very same people. Where's my check? Didn't stop with terrorism. Dear Mr. Feinberg, I don't understand. Last summer, my wife saved 3 little girls from drowning in the Mississippi River, and then she drowned a hero. How come I'm not eligible for a check? Dear Mr. Feinberg, 2 years ago, my son was walking down the sidewalk at Columbia Law School when he was killed by a hit-and-run drunk driver. Please, where's my check? How do you justify, you see, this program? In a society which frowns on special treatment and elitism and supports equal protection of the law and one size fits all, and how do you say 5,000 people who are the victims of life's misfortune get $2 million each? All these other people don't get anything. 0. They're not eligible. Now, I think you can justify the fund, but not by distinguishing among victims. People say to me, well, this was a foreign attack and the lady lost her, the wife drowned, saving people. That's the distinction. That's no distinction that I find very convincing. From the perspective of the American people, there's a big difference. From the perspective of the victims, I can't make the distinction, certainly not one that's very convincing. From the perspective of the nation, I think there's a big difference between Oklahoma City and the 9/11 attacks and all these other victims. 9/11 was different. It was like the Civil War. And the American people, from the perspective of the nation, wanted to do something, and this is what was done. And from that perspective, I think it is justifiable to make the distinction. But I hear the other side, believe me. That's one question. Second question asked all the time, if Congress did it over again, shouldn't they give everybody the same amount and not give everybody a different amount of money? Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a blunder, you see. But you see why it was done. Congress wanted to divert people voluntarily from litigating. Well, if you're going to try and convince people not to litigate, you've got to give them an attractive. It's got to be attractive for them not to litigate. Giving a banker $250,000 is not attractive. Once you tie it to the tort system, once you try and say to people, you're better off with the fund than litigating, there's no other way to do it but by giving everybody a different amount, because it'll take a different amount to get people not to go into the litigation lottery, you see. That was a problem. But as a theoretical matter, would it have been easier for me to give everybody, whether the banker or the busboy, the same? Absolutely. I got a series of great letters with Governor Keating of Oklahoma. Great guy. Dear Ken, I'm the governor of Oklahoma. I'm watching you administer this fund, and you're doing a great job. It's not your fault that Congress is making you give everybody a different amount of money. That's not the way we do things in Oklahoma. But good luck. Very truly yours, Governor Keating. I wrote him back. Oh, no, Governor Keating. He writes me, that's not the way we do things in Oklahoma. It's downright un-American. Good luck. Very truly yours, Governor Keating. I write him back. Governor, you may be right that Congress should have given everybody the same amount of money. But be very careful about calling it un-American the way they did it. Every day in Oklahoma City, juries give more to the banker and the bond trader than the waiter and the busboy if they get hit by an automobile. Every day in Tulsa, somebody falls off a ladder. If that person's a banker, he's going to get more or she's going to get more than the waiter who falls off a ladder. That's the American tort system. So you may be right, but I wouldn't, be careful about un-American. Thank you for your interest. Very truly yours. Back comes a letter from Governor Keating. Dear Ken, thank you for your comments. Very interesting. I still think Congress blew it. But do your best. Signed, Frank. P.S. But I won't say it's un-American, the way they're doing it, you see. So that's the second problem. Different amounts versus one amount for all. Final problem. The final question. Everybody asks, of course, Ken, if it happens again, will Congress do the same thing, set up a 9/11 fund? Not a chance. There isn't a chance that if a car bomb, God forbid, goes off in New York or San Francisco, Congress will set this program up like this again? Not a chance. This was an emotional response to 9/11. If Congress had waited a few more weeks, I don't think they would have done it this way, you see. I watched with fascination this horror, Katrina. A terrible tragedy. There wasn't the slightest interest in Congress in setting up a Katrina 9/11 fund. 1,000 people died. It isn't as if, it was debated. No one even introduced a bill to set up a 9/11 fund. I think there's a reason for that. We did it once. We got through it. Worked out. Great. No more. Why Katrina? Why not a tornado in Alabama? I mean, people died last week in Alabama. Georgia. Why not in Georgia set up a compensation fund? No. I think it highly, highly unlikely that this will be replicated. It's a precedent, I think, for nothing. It's a wonderful example, I think, of the spiritedness, the camaraderie, the basic goodness of the American people. The basic goodness. It was great going to Europe and talking to people about this, and they just couldn't believe it. What's the catch? No catch. The American people want this done. $7 billion. But it was a real study in human nature. A real study. Everybody who got a check, 5,300 people, millions of dollars. Some of the stories, you give people money. One lady says, I'll take the money. If anybody finds out I got this money, I got to pull my kids out of school. They'll kidnap my kids. I can't let anybody know about this money. I'll have to pull the kids. I'll have to hide my kids. Well, we did it all confidential and everything, Didn't disclose the names. Everybody who got a check, 5,300 people, we offered them as part of the award free, absolutely free financial planning. Every one of you 5,300 people, check off the box. You want free from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and Barclays and all these companies. We'll give you free financial planning. What to do with the money? Structures, save it, bonds, stocks, free. Just check off the box, 5,300 people. 180 took the financial planning. I'm not surprised. I told Goldman, don't think you're going to get many people. Mrs. Jones, don't you want help? You have 4 children. No, my next-door neighbors, Bolivian gold mines, whatever. But no one wanted the financial planning, and this is the way it was. So I think there we are. I think it's a fabulous example of the compassion and the generosity of the American people. I think it's a close question, but I think it was the right thing to do, and we've got 10 or 15 minutes for questions. So this is not an audience where that should be an issue. Yes?
My question is, you brought up earlier that there were these pro bono, these volunteers that that were available to assist these people. Did they smooth the way for these people rather than coming in and showing you videos?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The 1,800 lawyers who represented families pro bono, I was in constant communication with them. They did smooth the way. They helped convince people that this was the right thing and the best thing for them. And without the bar, without my fellow members of the legal profession, this would have never been the success that it was. There's that.
Okay. Why not give everybody a check for 9/11? I mean, I don't think that there's one person in this room whose lives haven't been negatively affected by the events of 9/11. It's like, why shouldn't the government be sued into bankruptcy for not having protected all of us on that day?
A couple of comments. First of all, your first point, why not everybody get a check? I don't know. Congress decided to just give these people compensation. Now, be very careful about making the argument that the government's at fault. Understand that the government, in setting up this program, never once stated that it was at legal fault. Never once, even 5 years later, has the government said that this was anything other than a sneak military attack by fanatics, and we're not legally responsible for what happened. This was not reparations. When the German government gives $5 billion to victims of the Holocaust, we're at fault, says the German government. When Ronald Reagan signed that law in 1981, we'll give $20,000 to every family member of Japanese citizens interned during World War II after Pearl Harbor on the West Coast. We apologize. That was wrong. Here's $20,000 each. Here, we'll set up a compensation fund, but don't expect us to say we are at fault. We weren't at fault, and we're not going to pay on the basis of fault. So you make 2 points. One, why not everybody get a check? Why not, I suppose, or nobody get a check? That's one of the arguments. Secondly, why shouldn't the government pay everybody because they were at fault? They don't say they were at fault. To this day, they don't say they were at fault. Yes, sir.
We have time for one, maybe two more.
2 more questions. Then I'll be around after people. Yes,
I was curious. I read an article about the fund, and I was wondering what personal effect did it have on you to go through all these stories and hear all of this?
Well, aside that I had more hair, it had a personal effect. It couldn't help but have a personal effect. You helped tremendously when your personal family and the entire country was behind me on this. I mean, this was a fascinating thing. Every politician of every stripe, the media, the American people, the letters that I got, keep it up. I still will walk through a Cleveland airport and somebody will stop me and say, aren't you the guy that, yeah, great job. $7 billion, you don't know whether to duck. Nope. No. Fabulous. We got through that. Thank you so much. All of that helped. When I did the hearings, it got rough. I'd have to break and walk around the block, and the New York air never smelled so good. Just getting away from it, the sun is shining, have an ice cream, and then you go back and wade in again with these stories that you had to listen. As soon as it was over, I downsized my law firm. I'm not interested in 35 lawyers and all that. I was 3 lawyers and a little consulting, do a lot more teaching. I wrote a book. The dean didn't mention my book. The dean didn't mention my book, What is Life Worth? Now, you may think that What is Life Worth, this book, you can probably find it at Borders or Barnes & Noble. But if they're sold out or if you can't find it, it's in paperback now. Don't worry. My supply of my book, virtually inexhaustible. So I can just email me, we'll get you a copy of the book. So those were some, and that's the way I think, I'm more fatalistic, I'll tell you that. I don't think I'll plan more than 2 weeks ahead. These people that day said goodbye to loved ones. See you for dinner, meet you after work, have a great day, bye-bye. Never saw them again, vaporized, nothing. Tough. One more. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the lack of a definition from Congress as to who was eligible for the fund. Was it literally no definition or an ambiguous one? And if it was no definition, was that on purpose by Congress? Or?
Who was eligible when Congress, Congress said those killed on 9/11 as a result of the terrorist attacks. Now, that was pretty clear to us. That's airplanes, World Trade Center, Pentagon. Got a little bit tricky. One death we had to decide. A cop. There's a stampede. Everybody wants to get on the Staten Island ferry to get over to Staten Island to escape the horror. And the cop, they're running. They practically trample them. And the cop gets on the Staten Island ferry, brings them over to Staten Island. And they race off and they're screaming and he drops dead of a heart attack. Was he a 9/11 death? Well, you go, yes, no, maybe. We decided he was. But a cop who died 6 weeks later, after attending 40 funerals of his friends, we decided was not sufficiently 9/11 related. The real problem with the physical injury claims, the physical injury claims were all types. I mean, we set up a geographic boundary for presumptive validity. West Street, Canal Street, Lower Broadway, and South Battery. And that if you were injured in that proximity, location, eligible. I mean, some people, Mr. Feinberg, I have emphysema and it's all the fault of 9/11. I live on East 86th Street. Ineligible. Mr. Feinberg, I live in Jersey City. I saw the plane hit and broke my leg. I fell down the stairs. Ineligible. But I mean, these were Solomonic things you had to decide. So, again, honored to be here. I think the center's doing wonderful work, Professor Sharp. It's one major reason I wanted to be here. I wanted to visit Cleveland and thank all of you for the support that you showed for the fund. And particularly, I want to thank the Dean and Case Western for the invitation. Thank you.
This is on behalf of the law school. On behalf of the law school, I get to keep this too. I'll let you pull it out of here. If you want. It says something. Oh.
Case School of Law with appreciation, Kenneth R. Feinberg, CISCDR, Distinguished Visitor Lecturer, Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Conflict and Dispute Resolution. Thank you.